And action. Hi, Sandy wanted to find out about what to do with motor vehicle accidents. And this is not going to be an insurance biased motor vehicle accident video. It's going to be more on what to do with the medical aspects of getting injured in a motor vehicle accident. So if this is the first time you're finding me, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and the alert button to find out when I do put out new videos. So I think the basics should be discussed first, and then we'll get into the injury part. So the basics are a lot of my young people, young drivers are now in the springtime being allowed to drive on their own because they're seniors, because it's nice outside, and soon when school finishes, they're going to want to take their car and do stuff during the day. So got to really be careful. In the springtime and right after school is dismissed in May and June, high accident rates. Spring usually is higher because of the change in weather. In Chicago, icy roads, snow, dark mornings usually limit the speed of driving. But once that restriction is out and school is out and a parent that's watching over you in the car is away, tendency is to be hitting the gas a little faster. So that's what opens up to accidents. Kind of like that rule, if you're going to a teaching hospital with residents, you never want to have surgery in July because that's where all the new residents come in. And the mortality of getting into an accident or having somebody botch something up is higher. So if you're going to a teaching hospital, which I love, I wouldn't have any elective surgery in July. So having said that, the 2 to 3 second rule. Some of my young patients and my old patients don't remember that. But what you have to do with that is to figure out your following distance. If you know the safe following distance in the morning, you will have a higher chance of reacting to a sudden stop in front of you. So the way you do that is you're following somebody and you watch the car in front of you, and as that car passes a telephone pole, you start counting 0, 1, 2, and the telephone pole, by the time you hit 2 to 3 of the count, should pass you. That way you know your following distance is proper. You can also do it a different way in calculating the old school way. For every 10 miles an hour that you are traveling in speed, you add a car length. So for most schools, you have to go 20 miles an hour in a neighborhood, or for example, and you should be 2 car lengths behind somebody. On the highway, 55 to 70 miles an hour, you should be 5 to 7 car lengths behind somebody. And that all changes. If you're driving a truck, it takes a longer amount of time to slow down that massive weight. If you're driving an old car, it might take longer. So be careful. And the reaction time, especially if you're distracted, it'll take longer to react to that. So that's why drunk drivers or sleepy people get into car accidents, because their reaction time is slower. So you should know the 2 second rule. You should be careful during dusk and dawn. In Chicago, when I'm driving my son to school, it's difficult going east because the sun is right over the horizon, so it's kind of blinding. So if your windshield is all dirty, the sunlight that hits the windshield will really refract and cause a glare. So that also is a distraction and will decrease, or I should say increase, the amount of time that you will safely need to follow somebody. Friday nights and Monday mornings, because everybody seems to be in a hurry. Friday nights, everybody's partying, so they're getting in the mood, and probably drunk drivers. Monday mornings, everybody's stressed out and usually late because they took time off on the weekend, so they're trying to rush. You will always be, you cannot control everybody else's driving habit. But if there are 2 lanes, I usually pick the right lane because it's slower. And in Europe, it has been shown that if you drive slower in the left lane, you're likely to cause an accident because people are trying to pass you. So bottom line is, if you want to take it easy, try to pick the right lane and watch out for tailgaters. The one thing you can't control anybody else's driving habit, but the one thing you can control is if you have a tailgater that is following you too closely, not following the 2 to 3 second rule, well, you can give yourself a little bit more allowance. I'm not saying hit the brakes, and I'm not saying drive too slow, but you might want to control the speed of that person in the back by following or driving at a safe mile per hour. So sometimes that person will just go ahead and pass you, which again opens up the possibility of accidents if you're driving too slow, but at least they'll get off your tail. Because here's the thing, if you happen to need to stop because a pedestrian comes in front of you, because somebody in front of you stops suddenly, and you get hit by the person behind you, your deductible, mine is $500 to $1,000. So even if it's a fender bender, I have to pay for the fender to be fixed. And that's not fair because somebody else is angry or following too closely. So anyway, and distractions are very important to try to avoid. Sometimes if I have a young driver, I can teach them the safety of the rules, how it feels to stand on the brakes, how it feels to skid in the snow. I think it's important to know those things for defensive driving. But sometimes if you live in Chicago at least, there's autocrossing events in Chicago. Audi Club of America, Porsche Club of America, the Miatas will do it. They all have, there's events on Sunday that if you belong to the club or if you're a visitor, you can participate in the event. The event is just coned off parking lot tactical driving to see how you perform with proper speed, feathering your throttle and braking. It's nice because you get to learn how the car reacts. If you learn how the car reacts, you'll be able to react to situations that are emergency, like stopping, properly. So I'll put some links down below on autocrossing in Chicago. So bottom line is, if you've been involved in an accident, if you get hit in the front, anything greater than 30 to 40 miles an hour, your airbags will be deployed. If you get hit on the side, usually most cars now will have side curtain airbags and they'll get deployed. So airbag in the front comes at a whopping fast speed, whether it's the dash, the steering wheel, or the passenger side dash. That thing will come out and probably break your nose. If you drive with your thumbs like this, the thumbs can actually get pulled back and you can break your thumbs. The likelihood of having problems is low, but at least it'll save your life. And then you have to deal with the powder afterward that comes out. So there's a couple things that can happen. And usually what happens is, even if that airbag gets deployed and stops you from hitting the steering wheel or going through, and you should be wearing a seatbelt, the side impact airbags also, you'll still be shaken around unless you're wearing a soft collar when you drive, and nobody does that. So because of that, usually your head gets bounced around. This 10-pound bowling ball gets bounced around a little bit. You'll have injuries. You'll have the impact injury from the airbag, here. You'll have the whiplash injury from your 10-pound head going like this. So you'll have bruises and you'll have muscle soreness or whiplash. Because of that, most people will have pain usually within 24 to 72 hours. Even if you're an athlete, you might have a tiny bit of pain, but it might not come till later. So don't just dismiss it and say, I'm fine, I don't need to go to the emergency room. The older you are, the younger you are, the more important it is to go to the emergency room, just to make sure that even if you don't feel anything, everything is okay. I've had a few patients have problems with spine being chipped or broken, and they didn't realize it. And then when I used to work at Cook County Hospital, the young people have this problem. If they get a high impact injury, the heart tends to shear and it can cause bleeding later on, so that'll cause death. But anyway, so always get checked out, see what the emergency ambulance guys tell you, and if they say you should go to the emergency room, you should go. Even if it's not paid for, you should really go. So what we usually do is, if we find that everything's cool on evaluation in the ER, they'll send you back to me, and this is what we're going to talk about. So sometimes if you do have whiplash, it's important to get the collars going, because the collar will stop excessive movements of the neck. And because the trapezius muscle especially usually has to pull back the head when you go like this, the trapezius muscle will be strained, and that'll usually cause small, tiny bleeding over the course of 72 hours. And the bleeding will make the muscle tighter and tighter. That's why it's delayed effect. But the less you move it, the faster the healing time, thus the reason for the collar. The problem with the collar, though, as most physical therapists will tell you, if you immobilize the neck or if you immobilize a shoulder, like you put your arm in a shoulder sling, the joint becomes weaker. And sometimes within 1 week of immobilizing a joint, you'll lose up to 20% of the muscle strength from before. So theoretically, even though the collar or the sling helped you, take off that thing and you'll be weaker than before. You'll have weakness and spasms. So I always say you should get into physical therapy or massage therapy, and the cool thing about motor vehicle accident insurance is if you have a lawyer, they should get that covered. Even regardless of whether it's covered or not, I think they're good healers to help you resolve your spasm faster. Sometimes they can even apply essential oils if they're a massage therapist, hot rocks, ice packs, or if you're a physical therapist, if you go to a physical therapist, they can use modalities like ultrasound, electric stimulation, deep tissue massage, all those things help to speed up the healing process and stop the inflammation. I think that anti-inflammatories and muscle relaxers are important. You have to maintain sleep, and if you're not sleeping, that means the muscle that was previously injured is not getting downtime to repair itself. So muscle relaxers are prescriptions. Anti-inflammatories, some of them are over the counter, like Advil, ibuprofen, Motrin, Aleve, aspirin, but the newer ones have less side effects actually. And although I did do videos on reflux and I don't like anti-inflammatories, I don't like prescriptions, but because of the impact injury, I'd like to decrease the healing time. So that's when I say it's important to use this stuff. Even narcotics. If it's severe pain and you're like this all the time, gotta dull up the brain and tell it, relax, you'll get through it, and you have to maintain sleep. So muscle relaxers are supposed to be 3 times a day, all day long, but they do dope you up. They give you a dry mouth. They make your reaction time even slower, so no driving with the muscle relaxers. But if you're very conservative, at least if you use it at night, it'll help you with sleep. Anti-inflammatories, you won't really notice a spectacular event or relief, but they do help with inflammation and speeding up the healing process. Also helps with pain too. As I mentioned, immobilizers are important. The other thing that's also important is taking pictures, JPEGs. It's important to take pictures of your black and blue marks, your scratches, your injuries, your broken teeth. I think for documentation purposes later, because here's the thing, even if you don't want to sue the other person or is innocent, and it's not your fault, you can have persistent pain from trigger points 10 years later. My wife went through a motor vehicle accident where she was driving a Land Rover, a big, heavy, 3,000-pound car, and she was hit by some kid that was just going through the intersection like a missile. So his small car destroyed the big Land Rover, and there was hip injury or a bruise. And you would think, it's a little bruise, so what? Well, here we are about 15 years later, still having aches and pains. And imagine if you're an athlete and you depend on your winnings to get you to the next race, and you can't run anymore. That would be cool. That would be not cool. Imagine if you work on a computer and your whiplash prevents you from, or you have trigger points now and you can't do 8-hour shifts anymore. You won't know that till later, but if you say to the insurance company, I'm okay, don't worry about it, just pay for my car, well, that's cool, but you will be stuck with pain and it'll be life altering. So you should always take pictures just in case it doesn't go the way you think it's going to go. And that brings me to the next point. Should you get a lawyer? I'm not a lawyer, but I was involved in one of the first car accidents in New York back in the 80s, where Hertz rented to a young person with, I don't think, had insurance, and she blew through the intersection. She clipped my hand, so she broke one of the bones in my wrist, but she took 3 other people down the street intersection. This was at night. She was a new driver. She was partying. I just remember my 2 people hopping. One guy broke his leg. Another person, that person I was with, got a cut from forehead to nose. So anyway, from that point on, I think the rental companies do not rent to anybody less than 23 or something like that. But I still remember that event, and that was a long time ago. However, things can last, so it's important. I had a lawyer that helped me through that. Otherwise, because I wasn't I wasn't driving a car, I would have just had to deal with my aches and pains. But my lawyer at least took care of me, took care of the lasting effects. The other thing is to also consider herbals. I think that sometimes when you use topicals like CBD oil, or I like Young Living's Panaway, or ice packs, it's very important therapeutically to help with the relief of inflammation. So there's a lot of topical things you can take advantage. There's turmeric that you can take advantage of. I like Doctor's Best high absorption curcumin. It was approved by Consumer Labs. And there's a couple other things you can do, staying away from inflammatory foods, dairy, and gluten for the short time. Sometimes I'll also say, most importantly, before I finish this, is decrease your current exercise and your current activity level by 25%, because even if you can power through and do what you normally did at your labor job or at the gym, you want to decrease the healing time. So you don't want to daisy chain on. You don't want to keep the muscle spasm continued on by trying to get your exercise routine out. So Nobody's going to want to hear it, but when you're training for a marathon, and most people in Chicago are starting to train for the Chicago Marathon in October, we're going to have to postpone the aggressive training because I think it will just have the aches and pains continue on. I'd say compress all the healing time, then get back in, even if it's delayed, then get back into the training plan. So hopefully this helps for you other drivers or you other people involved in motor vehicle accidents. By the way, nothing against the insurance company, but until this is 100% great, no more pain, no disability, don't close the case. And that's where the lawyer will probably help you. Personal injury lawyers are questionable. You see them on TV a lot, but they are for your defense. And if you're not a lawyer, you don't know what to do with regards to telephone calls, getting bills paid. And that's one cool thing about motor vehicle accident insurance. It's not like medical insurance. Medical insurance does not cover massage therapy, doesn't cover some chiropractors, doesn't cover acupuncture, but when it's a motor vehicle accident, you can get all that stuff covered in addition to pillows, essential oils, stuff like that, collars, slings, changes in your desk that should be covered because they were secondary to the accident. So hopefully this helps Andy and everybody else. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the clinic.